Hey guys, it's Jen from Elevate Beauty Education, Supply and Studios. So I'm getting asked a lot right now. It's obviously sick season, and so lots of students are asking about cancellation policies and sick policies. So this is a very relevant topic, and things I think have changed a lot after the last 2 years. No one can deny that the P word has shifted our businesses a lot, and after the last 2 years, we're all trying to adapt to the new reality of what's happening. And it's awesome now that people don't come to their appointments when they're sick, but the flip side of that is it leads a lot of rescheduling. And so we do have to adapt our businesses to be able to survive in this new marketplace and be able to be competitive, but not only that, profitable, so that our businesses can be sustainable. And we actually want to keep doing them, because let's be realistic, the worst thing that could happen is to not set policies and have your business be completely not profitable, and for you not to be able to continue to serve your clientele. Because let's be real, we all have to make some sort of a paycheck to be able to provide for our families, to be able to be continuing to provide top-notch service. So as you get more busy too, you are definitely going to have to implement these policies and be a little bit more firm about implementing these policies as well. And no one likes to implement these policies, but the truth is that if you don't, it's chaos in your studio. Your clients aren't going to like it. There's going to be no open appointments in your schedule. You are going to be grouchy. You are going to be working super long days with big holes in the middle. If you are thinking about ever having staff, let me tell you, no staff is going to stay with you through this. Either that, or you're going to have to pay them for the hours and the gaps in their schedule and all the cancellations and shifting around, and that gets really expensive. The reality is that if any person went to their job and their boss said, okay, you're going to just sit down or go do whatever for like 2 hours on no notice, that job would suck really quickly. And same thing, if you didn't know what your hours were and what you could expect to be making or working or committing to your work and your family in like weeks, how do you plan for work-life balance? How do your employees plan for it either? It's just not possible, especially if your employees are coming from farther away. Like if they don't live right near the studio, some of them are going half an hour to and from, so that's an hour each time they're coming back and forth the studio. If they have a big gap in the middle of their day, they're not likely going to want to be keeping to work for you. And it's also, if it's you, it's making your day a lot longer. That's the time you could be spending with your family or researching to make your business better or something, like anything more than that. So yeah, as you do get more experience, you do want to be on top of this, because if you want to provide an elevated experience and a more luxurious experience, you do have to love what you are doing. You have to be passionate about it. You have to also be respecting the time of other clients in the schedule and yourself to make sure that you don't get burnt out, but also that not one client is in there rescheduling and bumping everything around for everyone else, or taking up all the booking times when other people are left without times that they really need. So this is my suggestion, and you can take it or leave it. If you want to DM me at elevatelash.ca, I can also talk it out with you. But the busier you are and the more experienced you are, typically the longer you need for cancellations. So if you are an inexperienced artist, I would recommend setting it at 24 hours, because honestly, you don't probably have an established clientele, and you can handle cancellations a lot easier than someone who does have a very established clientele, and likely they're not booking in a lot of new bookings. In that instance, those will be holes in their schedule. So the more experienced you are, when someone is rescheduling, that means that you have to add them into overtime in the next week. And then when you have to do that with a bunch of people, because when you don't make that policy, a lot of different people will probably take advantage of that. You're just going to end up working so much crazy hours that you can't predict and having no work-life balance. So I did this for a long time until it became completely unsustainable. I literally did nothing but work in my studio, come home and eat dinner at like 9 o'clock with my husband, and have absolutely no life. And it just, something had to give. And so even though now I went to a 5-day cancellation policy, it really doesn't work for everyone's schedule, I will say that. And you absolutely will have people that can't stay with you, and that's really sad. But then there's this whole other side of people that are really appreciative, because they do have the most available openings, and it's like you don't have the bunch of people in your schedule constantly rescheduling and eating up a bunch of appointments, because when they push their appointments, they're going into these other weeks where people need to like be booking in their regular fills, or they have emergencies that come up and need to come in earlier and can't come in earlier because someone's canceled last minute on that appointment and doesn't have enough time to reschedule. Basically, most people know what they're doing within 24 hours, and you're only going to get walk-ins who are coming in the next 24 hours. So if you have a bunch of people canceling on you last minute, then that means that you're going to have a day where you have a bunch of hours that you just have to sit around for, and then there's a day where you're going to have to tack them on to stay overtime. And that's just not really fair for anyone, because you're going to end up overworked and getting grouchy, and that doesn't serve anyone. So when you have more control of your schedule and you teach your clients to prioritize their self-care appointments and respect the time of the other clients in the studio as well as your time, then everything goes a lot smoother. So my recommendation again for brand new artists, set it at 24 hours, because you are not fully booked and you are a lot more flexible. You're also trying to build your clientele as much as possible. When you are more experienced, when your schedule is like probably 50% full, I would go for like 3 days. And when you're 70 to like 100% full, I would do 5 days, because once you get to the point where you are 100% full, it is so much harder to implement that policy with a bigger clientele. And not only that, you are probably going to be in the place where you are looking for employees. And so you want to do that shift before you hit the need to have that employee. So you have established the clientele that this is like the new policy and they're going to be comfortable with it, instead of doing it when you're bringing on someone and having a problem or not having it at all. And then you bring on this person and they have the holes in their schedule, and you have to either pay them for those holes out of pocket to be able to keep them on staff, or you have to have them basically go take a walk, but legally you're supposed to pay those people. So it gets very expensive very fast for you, and save yourself the trouble and create those boundaries, and it will go much smoother for both your client and for yourself and for your future staff or your current staff. It's just not possible to maintain work-life balance and a profitable studio when you're getting last-minute cancellations all the time. So when it comes to sick policies, we want to be really flexible with these. No one really wants to implement any of these policies either. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have to do this, but it really is our job as studio owners to provide the best experience for everybody. And that means protecting work-life balance so that you can be passionate and well-rested for every appointment. And it also means that you are respecting the time of other clientele who are trying to book into your schedule. So it's a really delicate balance. But what I have found through it all works best, because you really do not want clients coming in when they're sick. You do have to provide that leeway. It's just what the new norm is. But you also don't want to encourage people to take advantage of this policy. And so the best solution, I think, is to still charge your late fee, but offer to credit it towards their fill appointment. And so I have in my studio done up to 2 months. This was more so back in the days when you had to actually quarantine, that I had done this policy just to make sure the client could get back on their feet with like going through their quarantine and then getting back to work, doing all the things that they needed to do, and then they could like come back when they were ready. Now I would say you could probably shorten that. Myself, I'm still going to keep 2 months just because I feel it's generous. It gives the client a lot of time to figure out what they want to do and get back onto their self-care routine. But what you don't want to do is just, I think, allow a straight up cancellation, because it leaves your studio in a very vulnerable position, especially if you're in the position of taking on employees, because if you do have those cancellations, they are going to be last minute. And that absolutely means, if you're following the regulations of Canadian government, you are, I think even in the States, except if they're subcontracting. So that means you're still going to be paying them on payroll. And so you still have to account for that money. Not only that, but you still have those studio expenses. And trust me, there's times where your whole day will cancel. I've seen it where a whole week is canceling. And I've heard it, especially from permanent makeup studios, that happens really fast, because these are like 4-hour appointments possibly that you are booking, that your whole schedule can be cleared out. You still have those base expenses in your studio. And the truth of the matter is that you have to protect yourself no matter what. And your studio, what you want to think of is your whole clientele, not just one specific person, right? And so if you are putting yourself in a position where you're vulnerable and you're possibly having to be too extended for payroll and all your expenses, and you could be put in a position where you're having to shell out a big loss in order to just sustain the sickness, and then also having to reschedule all those appointments and take on the overtime, this policy is going to dampen down on that. It's going to to make sure that you can continue to be there for your community no matter what. It's still going to suck having to fit people in later, but you will have a little bit of money to cover it over payroll, even though you will have to absorb that later as well. It gives you a little bit of a safety, just in my opinion, the best way to get through less than optimal situation while respecting all the other clients in the studio itself, your responsibility to the community, and your balance of work life, so that you can continue doing what you're doing, still give some sympathy and empathy to that client, help them through the situation so they can still continue on with their self-care routine, which is really important. And that's the saddest thing, right? Because once you're sick, more than anything, need your self-care routines. So yeah, you want to help that client as much as possible. In addition to that, I will always try and work them into my schedule as soon as I can, and then credit that 50% fee back onto their account and give them a tiny bit of extra time to bump them up. You just want to make sure that you have a policy in place that works for you. And then again, when you're newer, you might consider doing no sick policy, but you can get yourself in a really big jam that way too. Some people will take advantage of you and not respect your time. So I would recommend just implementing it from the beginning. It is a very fair policy, I think, because if someone is sick and they are wanting to get back on their self-care routine, it shows a commitment towards them, to your studio, and their continued self-care.